we're going to look at how to build a bar graph and frequency table. So bar graphs are a great way to display qualitative data. But often before you can build the bar graph, you might need to create something known as a frequency table. So a frequency table is a way to sort of organize a group of information in a way that allows us to sort of quickly see how many things belong in each group. So we have a few different columns in our frequency table. So the first column here gives us our category. So what are the sort of different groups we're going to sort things by? Frequency is sort of the number in each group. And then down here, relative frequency, that's going to be the percent of the total. And the cumulative frequency, for our sake, we're going to actually make that the cumulative relative frequency. And so that will basically be just double checking that we ended up counting all 100% of the group that we're looking for. So number in group. Okay. Now, in this particular case, we're looking at grade breakdown. So we have A, B, C, D, F. And so we can go up here and we can sort of count. So if I wanted to see, okay, how many Fs are there? So I see 1, 2, 3 Fs. So I would write 3 in that frequency thing. And I might scribble them out so I know that I'm done with them. And I would keep going. I would do the same thing for Ds. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Ds. You know, and I would keep going. I already did this in advance. There are actually 8 Cs. There are 9 Bs and there are 13 As. And I like to actually go through and add another row to this frequency table that's just my totals. And so here I would total up all these values and find that there are 40. And I need that number to do my relative frequency because relative frequency is the percent. So when I go through and find that relative frequency here, I would be doing 13 divided by 40 times 100 to get a percent, and that would end up being 32.5%. And then I would keep going, and I'd do the same thing, 9 out of 40 times 100, and I would get 22.5%. And then 20% for the next row, 17.5%, and 7.5%. Now, quick check that you calculated the percents right, you had the right total number. If I go through and add up all these percents, they should add up to about 100%. And I say about 100%, you might occasionally get it at 99 or 90, like, 9.5 or 101. And that type of 1 percentage point error might just be from rounding error within your percents. In this particular problem, the percents came out as exact values, so I didn't have that issue, but you might find it. And the other way to sort of check is sort of to come up with that cumulative frequency. So cumulative frequency without the relative in there would really just be adding up the frequency values. We're going to, for the most part, do cumulative relative frequency in which we add up the percents as we go. And what I mean by that is, I'm going to switch colors here just so we have a different sort of color. The first row, well, we only have 32.5%. But the next row, I take that 32.5 and I'd add it to 22.5. So I have 32.5 plus 22.5, and that would actually equal 55%. So it's almost like a running total is a great way to think about it. Now I take that 55% and I add 20 to it, and I'm at 75%. And then I add 75 to 17.5, and I get 92.5%. And then last but not least, that 92.5 plus 7.5 comes out to that total 100% that I'm looking for. And so that would be how I complete my frequency table based off the data that I was given. Now, the next step is I want to take my frequency data and create a bar graph. So we constructed the frequency table. Now, I'm going to go through and sort of set up my bar graph. Now, I'm going to use black here, and use some lines. So we need an axis, and we need an axis here. So we have a horizontal and we have a vertical axis. Along the horizontal axis is where you're going to label your categories. Now in this category, we're looking at grade breakdown. So I'm going to sort of label the axis, grades, and then each category gets sort of its own like section. So it's like here we have the A's. So I'm going to put it under the line. So we have A's, and then B's, C's, D's, F. Oops, helps if I write F, not 5. Erase that and try again. So we've placed category labels along the horizontal. Next, we need to scale our y-axis. So if I look at my y-axis is going to be frequency. And so I'm going to just label frequency. And then I need to get all the way up to 13. You want to space your numbers equally, and you can choose what you count by. I'm going to just count by ones. 13 isn't that many. I think I can fit them all in there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I like to label a little as I go. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. It fits perfectly. All right, so I have my labels. And last but not least, I now need to draw in the bars. They need to be about the same width, and they shouldn't touch. Now, that's a key thing when keeping in mind with our bar graphs is our bars never touch. We want to make them the same widths. If you make them different widths, that becomes a misleading graph. And it really doesn't matter how wide you make each bar. It's really up to you. I like to keep them all the same color if they're all describing the same quantity. So A here should go up to 13. And if I was doing this by hand, I probably would use a ruler just to make sure, my bars looked a little neater, and I kept the same width sort of as I went through. So there's my A bar. You do not need to fill it in. You can if you want to. So B, I'm going to go over here to 9 and give myself a height. And again, I want to keep it as close to the same width as A as possible. And I'm eyeballing it. So, it's not going to be perfect, and shading it in again. So there's 9. The next one was at 8. So it should be a little lower. Then at 7, 5, 6, 7. And then a drop down to 3. So we went through, we labeled our axes, we scaled our axes, we labeled those scaling. The last thing you want to make sure you include on your bar graph is you do want to give it a table. So we're just going to call this grade data. We weren't given any more information about it. You could call it grade breakdown. Maybe it was grades in college math classes. I don't know. I wasn't given that. So I kept it sort of vague and sort of not as specific. But keep in mind, so we have a title, we have labels to our axes, we labeled within the axes like what we were counting by. Our bars don't touch, they're about the same width, and that would be how we make a bar graph.